All right, Peter, we are live
We're
on
live.
Gen XYZ, our last episode before Christmas and New Year. So here we are. Welcome. And if you've joined us, if you're here today, please comment, please interact. The more the better. Our show gets a little slow at times when we're just talking to each other. We'll keep it going, but the more interaction, the better. We'll stop and address your comments as we go, and we'd love to hear from anyone watching today. But I'm Pete. I'm the Gen Xer,
and I'm Peter. I'm the millennial, the Gen Y, and we got virtual Ashley here.
You may notice that we're missing our third very important member of our group, who always sits in the middle, is Ashley. So virtual Ashley has joined us, but Peter, we did the same thing. I don't know if you know, but when you were out, we had you virtually, and we had kind of a silly picture.
Obviously, Ashley asked me to pose for it, and she was like, show us that you're on vacation. So
you looked vacation. I actually just looked surprised in this, but I thought this was a little lame. We could do better. So rather than just static virtual Ashley, we're gonna have interactive virtual Ashley today. And so we can check with her on occasion for her opinions, see if she has anything to say. I doubt she will, but
we're living in 2024 already. We've got virtual, interactive Ashley here.
We should have called her AI Ashley.
AI, yeah, ChatGPT Ashley.
All right, Ashley, what do you think about this? Are you good? Well, let's see how it goes.
I don't think.
All right. Well, so that's how it's going to go with virtual Ashley today. We're not going to get much from her. So if you're here, comment if you're here, so we know our comments are working, and we know that that we are in fact live streaming. Because the other thing we're missing without Ashley being here is the person who actually pulls all this together for us. So if you're watching, we would love to hear from you, and of course we miss our Gen Z partner.
Yeah, it'll be fun without somebody wrangling us how we're gonna fend for ourselves. So
that's right. So
welcome to the show.
There she is. Okay, there she is again. I gotta leave her alone. Okay, so Peter, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about worst interview stories, horrible interview stories. I think is what we officially titled this. But yeah, we've got quite a few.
Interview nightmare stories,
yes.
Horror stories. I think that's what it is.
Some of them are more funny, I feel like, than horror. But yeah, we've got quite a few to go over. So I figured let's just talk through some of our funniest stories that we've got.
All right. So before we do, though, I do have to get something off my chest, so to speak. That I put a post on LinkedIn last week. I thought it was rather innocuous, to be frank. I didn't think much of it, but I'd been in a couple conversations recently where staffing recruiters from other companies had mentioned to me that they no longer check recruiters. Check references, professional references specifically, and I found that surprising. So I put a post about it, and yesterday on LinkedIn it started getting traction. And turns out a lot of people think professional references are a waste of time, not needed. A lot of people are confused and think there's laws preventing this from happening, which I found fascinating. So what am I missing? I mean, you're the millennial, so this is why we have different generations. Is this just me being an old guy thinking that?
I mean, to be honest, I was surprised as well. I guess I get that people are like, hey, they're not as useful because you can fake it. And yes, if you put any amount of effort into it, you could go through this whole convoluted process and fake a reference if you want to really, really do it. We're assuming that that's not what we're talking about in the case. And usually when you're talking to a reference, most places are going to ask you for a manager level reference. And I feel like if you're just giving your friend, that kind of defeats the purpose of it. Except, I guess you're proving that you have somebody who's willing to speak on your behalf. I've not heard of anybody being super against it. It's just a thing that you do if someone asks for it. Usually, not all places ask for it, but I've never heard of anyone being vehemently against it or that you couldn't do it. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, call a little heat over it, which I'm happy to absorb and respond to. I'm a big believer that the more thorough you are in your recruiting effort and screening, especially as a third party recruiter, I feel we're obligated to be as thorough as possible. I think that's why our clients like working with us, value us, come back to us over years and years, because we screen candidates as much as we can. So I was surprised to see so much pushback, and also how many people think, like I said, they think it's illegal.
Well, you know, weird. Like also, you think about even beyond just jobs, like to get into like graduate school. Almost all graduate school like they want like letters of recommendation or references. Like, so why is that allowed to? But like an employer isn't allowed to like ask you. Like, that's common throughout things is getting someone to speak on your behalf, because obviously you're going to try and sell yourself the best. So somebody else who knows you and can speak on, you know, your experience or how good you are at something or your attendance record, like that's relevant. I mean, you can't know everything about someone from an interview.
Yeah, I mean, listen, despite what the disclaimers on packages say, or whoever uses this, maybe it's commercials or whatever it is, that past performance is a good indicator of future results when it comes to employees and job candidates. So interesting take. If you're watching, let us know about that too before we get into our horror stories. What do you think about professional references? Love them, hate them, believe in them? Let us know what you think.
Yeah, we're just curious to see, like, you know, what the general consensus is on that, because, you know, reference checks seem to be something pretty straightforward, and most of the questions aren't too hard hitting. They're just generally like, would you work with this person again?
All right, so each show we do kind of has a theme and a feel. And yeah, last week we had comments kind of nonstop, which makes it much more fun and interesting. This week, thanks for Michael for jumping in early. But I'm a little I'm thinking maybe without Ashley here, we don't get the comments.
It was like I should have been the virtual person. You guys would get more comments.
Well, we can check with her for an opinion on this.
I think she agrees with me.
No, she's got a lot to say. Well, unfortunately, we just can't hear virtual Ashley, so we'll let her. Wow, that's not a good thing to pause on. So, so we did get a comment that someone said that it's nearly mandatory. That's where we're coming from. That's what I've always believed. But if you're interested in looking at that post, it's on my profile. I think I had like 50 comments on it, something like that, of people just from all over the place. I had a guy from Singapore chime in, people from the UK. Interesting that would stir up controversy. What doesn't today, I guess. Maybe that's what I should have realized. But yeah, a lot of people don't no longer believe that references are a necessary part of the recruiting process. Interesting.
Yeah, it's strange. I think it's kind of in tune with what we've seen. A lot of people believing like things are, you know, invasive of your personal life. And we'll actually get into some of that, some of the stories I've got this specifically about people who have that attitude.
Right. Exactly. Well, okay. So we're going to let virtual Ashley ponder this for a while, since that's what she appears to be doing. And we'll shift to what our main topic is today: interview horror stories. We have lots of them, most of which we can't tell. I'll just go ahead and say that on the record. Being in the staffing industry as we are, we have thousands of candidates we work with every year, hundreds of interviews for sure every year. And, there's always something that's happening. And despite our best screening efforts, there's always a surprise. So we'll share the ones we can.
Of some of the stories that we've got, which we were unable to share.
All right, so we're just moving past references, and we get a comment. Someone thinks they're a waste of time. Please let us know why you think that. Let us know, give us some context there. We'd love to hear it.
Maybe we'll make a whole show on that one, since, you know, it seems to be a hot topic.
All right, we'll just spend a couple minutes on this, because now we're getting some comments. But someone else, Jordan, said, it should be in the ideal scenario, but it's very subjective opinion. It is a subjective opinion, absolutely. We know that. What I believe, and what Four Corner Resources believes in as a result, is when we check professional references, we look to speak specifically with a former manager or supervisor, a direct supervisor or manager. So we don't take friends, family, neighbors, people who the candidate used to go to lunch with in their old job. We realize those aren't very relevant. And there is subjectivity to it. Believe it or not, we get a lot of interesting conversations that come out of references that weren't good scenarios. And you really get to see, I think, as a longtime recruiter, I learn a lot about someone's character when they have to talk about something that was adversarial. And when they say, hey, I left under bad circumstances, most people have that happen in their career at some point, right? And it doesn't mean you're going to be ruled out as a candidate, but honesty, openness, how you handled that adversity, how you left even under stressful and tough times, that as a recruiter, you learn a lot from those interactions. And I have always valued a candidate who will say, hey, listen, I reported to Jane Smith at my job. I was there for 3 years. I reported to her directly for 6 months before I left. And it's not going to be a good reference. And here's why. I respect that. I value that, because if you tell me the bad, right, then I can trust you. If you're only telling me good, I don't care whether it's a candidate, if it's a client, if it's an employee that I'm working with, a peer, if you only ever tell me what the best possible news is and put yourself in the best light, I'm never really going to get to know you. I'm never really going to get to trust you. So as a good recruiter will consider the entirety of the situation. And you've got to know the bad at some point, because if you only hear the good, you really don't know the full story.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we deal with tons of hiring managers and stuff too. Like people who only want to hear like the good thing or the super like sanitized version of everything. They don't really want to hear, the truth. And I think being able to have somebody who can actually be real with you and be like, listen, this was 5 years ago or whatever. I had this job. I've had a good one since then. At the time I was young, I didn't realize X, Y, and Z. I maybe burned that bridge. So it's not really going to be a great one. I've got other people who can attest to the fact that I've, matured since then. I've had that conversation multiple times with people. And I'm always like, all right, well, people change over time. Big surprise. Like I get that. So,
right.
Being able to be honest, I feel like is the thing. And I can see where, it is subjective, but, as long as you're asking just kind of basic type questions that are really, across the entire spectrum, I think you can kind of rule some of that out,
Yeah. Michael made a comment about, being a consultant, and the freelance market certainly changes the parameters a little bit, but that's all part of it. It's very nuanced, and no two situations are alike. And, I say there's exceptions, and they happen often in this world. One of the common comments yesterday was, well, what about, when someone's currently employed, you can't check that reference? No, of course not. Right. I mean, but I generally have found that candidates and our clients over the years are almost always rational, logical people, and you just have to communicate openly. So we have our stated policy. We tell our clients we're going to check references. Our recruiters know they're supposed to check references. We tell the candidates we have to check the references. But when people are your product, and we're talking about individuals with so many different backgrounds and unique circumstances, you have to be flexible and agile. You have to pivot. You have to look at the individual circumstance and say, okay, we have to do it differently in this scenario, and here's why. And the key is just to communicate, right? Communicate with the candidates, communicate with the client, get everyone on the same page. And rarely does this get in the way. And I think it enhances the value of what we do. I think it makes for a better recruiting experience all around. So I think we're going to keep checking references.
Can't think of a time where we haven't been able to figure out a solution,
That's it. That just doesn't seem to happen. All right. So here we are, interview horror stories. You want to go first, or do you want me to?
So the most recent one that I can think of. So this was an interview that I was working with I was working with a recruiter, and they had a candidate, and this was, I believe the position was someone in HR. I want to say it was like an HR admin or something like that. Someone looked more junior in their career. So the candidate
so this is we're starting with our own, right? We agreed.
No. Oh, I can start.
Well, this isn't yours.
Oh no, this one isn't.
You can't share. You can't make fun of someone else until you start make fun of yourself. That's
all right. We'll start with mine. The best one I can. So this is. Keep in mind that at the time I was a freshman in college. I'm going to guess I was around 19. I was interviewing at a bookstore, a large book chain, and so naturally, my interviewer was a woman a little bit older than me. I would say she must have been maybe around 30. And our conversation kind of went to what types of books do we like? This was only one of my first real interviews, like since.
Oh, enough with the caveats. Come on, stop making excuses.
So I wanted to try and we started talking about different books and different genres of books. And she let me know that she was very into the spiritual section of the bookstore. She really followed horoscopes and auras and crystals and all of those things she said she was interested in, thought it was really interesting. I was trying to make a good impression. So I naturally was like, oh yeah, I love that stuff too. You know, I've read some horoscope books. Mind you, I don't know anything about these things. So I didn't really plan for her immediate follow-up question to be like, oh wow, like what was the last one you read? And my mind just like went blank. So I'm sitting there like, and I think the answer I gave her was, I kind of like fumbled. In retrospect, it was probably super obvious and I said the book was called Horoscopes and You. And she was like, I haven't heard of that one. And she like had gestured like right before that they have a section of them like right over there. Like, and she was like, had clearly stalked it. She's like, I've never heard of that one. I was like, oh, well, it's, I think I said something about how like my sister had it or something. And then she's like, oh, well, what was it about? And I was like, oh, birth signs and I just kind of went off rambling for like, it must've been a good 30 seconds before she stopped me. And she's like, okay, well, that's really interesting. And I was like, yeah, I read something about Capricorns and how that's a really good, winter sign. And in learning since then, that is Capricorn is not is like in the mid, is like January. And I was like, oh no, I said it was a fall sign. I said it was a fall sign. And she's like, oh, well, that's interesting. And she quickly changed the subject. I did not get a call back. So
that's you didn't get the job.
No, it was funny because I could very clearly see a shift in the vibe. Like it was going really well. And then she like caught me in a lie and I couldn't like cover it. So I guess the moral of the story is if you're going to like embellish, you need to actually be able to back it up and have some sort of information there. Because I just like went off the rails and started just rambling about made up stuff.
So the real moral of the story is don't lie.
Yeah. I said embellish. Yeah.
Is if you do, make sure you can get away with it. But no, don't. Look, we see that all the time. It's normal. It's not. It shouldn't be normal, but it is. People embellish. People puts up on their resumes that they can't back up. And one of the things that every candidate needs to know that if something is on your resume, you need to be prepared to defend it, explain it, expound upon it. So know that if something's on your resume, you're accountable for it.
And like, you want to have a good rapport with the interviewer. But most people, me at this point in my career, like you don't interview a lot. So like you get flustered, and that was where I just started rambling. I don't even remember half the things I said. I feel like I just blacked out. I found myself talking about Capricorn. I'm like, I don't even know, where am I? So yeah, make sure that you just try and keep your bearings and don't just ramble on and on about whatever, because it's going to make you look like an insane person. So, all
right. So if you have an interview horror story, share it with us. This is what we're doing. It's the middle of the month. It's almost the end of the year. We want to have a little fun with this today. We have virtual Ashley joining us, who is out of town and couldn't be here, unfortunately. We'll check in with her on occasion, as we've done a few times, see if she has anything to add. No,
nothing. Yeah, nothing.
No, she still does not. All right. So, well, we'll check back in a little bit. All right, now I got to share mine. My first one, and I can't make the excuse that I was a teenager. I was a college graduate when this happened. I had quit my first professional job without a backup plan. Also, not a wise thing to do. And my girlfriend at the time, future in-laws, had a friend who ran the office for a Smith Barney. I don't know if it was a franchise or what, but it was very stuffy, old school stock brokerage office. Yeah. And I went and interviewed for with this guy, and I was like, wow, it sounds like a chance to make money. I'd been in recruiting. I'd left that and knew I could sell and wanted to sell and keep doing that and work with clients, and had a great interview with him. And I thought, man, this is wonderful. It sounded like just a great opportunity. And then the guy said, all right, you have to take a personality test. All right, fair enough. And I made the mistake. So I just went on saying, don't ever embellish or fabricate anything. And there were so many questions on this test about, do you like working as alone or as a team? Do you like autonomy, or do you like working as a group? And I thought, man, everyone wants a team player. So I need to show that I am the king team player. That is me. And so I answered every question that way.
Immediately try to game the system. You're like, I know what they want to hear.
Yeah, I figured I was smarter than smarter than these people. I was clearly not. So I was sitting in the room, waited for him. He reviews the results and said, "Listen, I don't know how to tell you this, but you are not a fit at all whatsoever." And I was devastated and humiliated, right? So my in-laws were going to clearly hear this, or my future in-laws.
Yeah, like this is a family friend.
And the guy says, "Yeah, you need other people around. You need to work with other people. This is a job for people who want to be autonomous and work alone." And I was like, "Yeah, but no, I thought that was just what I was supposed to say. I really do want to work that way." And the guy's like, "Yeah,
I was just telling you what you want to hear." I thought
it was so painful. Great lesson, just like the one you learned. Like, don't be someone that you're not, because those tests do exist for a reason. And there's lots of odd things in interviews, lots of weird questions. We could do a whole show just on bizarre interview questions that are asked by
we do the flip side of this interview, like weird interviewers.
There's no shortage of those too. But I wasn't true and honest, and I think it all worked out. I'm glad I didn't get that job, but at the time, man, that was a tough pill to swallow.
That's a painful one, especially when you have to explain, be like, "No, I lied. That was me lying."
All right, Jarrett weighed in. Thank you, Jarrett. Let's see. I should have maybe read this before I put it on the screen, so we're going to read it together. Gave us three interviewers, brought in 4, asked questions. Oh, those are the worst. Like that. That's awful.
Interviews.
Walk out knowing he wasn't getting called back. So look, so I had another one. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I just did a podcast the other day talking about group interviews, and I think that is just a really strange thing to do. And I don't mean panel interviews where there's multiple interviewers. I mean multiple candidates in the room publicly, openly competing against each other. I think that's not a good scenario for anyone. But in the same time frame where I quit this job without having one lined up, without a plan, this is how long ago it was. This was 1995, I think. I was answering job ads from the newspaper back then, and I showed up at called. And they said it was a real quick conversation. They're like, "Yep, be here Tuesday at 3, whatever it was." And I walk in and I notice a lot of people are arriving in this parking lot at the same time as me and walking towards the same office, which kind of struck me as odd. And I walk in, there's like 20 people in the room, and it was a multi-level marketing kind of scam pitch deal. And here was all these people who were broke, looking for a job, hoping to get a paycheck. And there's this commission only MLM thing that I think the whole pitch was, which I realized pretty quickly into it, like you actually had to pay them in order to sign up for their course or whatever. Half the room walked out. I was one of them. And that was
that like triggered a core memory for me. So I used to work in retail, and there was a store that I worked at, and they used to do group interviews. And I remember like when I sat there was like 5 people, and they would ask it was weird because they'd ask the question and then they would go ask the next question. So like I had positioned myself, like I was like the last person. So I got to see everybody's question, like answers before. So like mine were all like perfect. They're like, "What's your biggest weakness?" And this one guy's like, this one guy said his biggest weakness was that he got out of breath when he went running, and that he wasn't really a strong runner. And get up, feel like that's what they're asking. Then another person did like genuinely like straight face was like, "I think my biggest weakness is that I'm just too much of a perfectionist. Like I don't really have anything wrong with me. And like, that's a weakness because people can't relate."
You have to wonder how many people have given that answer in an interview, thinking that they're outsmarting the interviewer.
Or like, why do you want this job? I remember there was one dude, and he didn't care. He was just like answering. And there was one dude, and then he needed a certain number of interviews to get the unemployment office back, and that was why he was there. And
there you go.
The guy was like, "All right, I guess."
Honesty, maybe it's the best policy there. All right, Michael, what do you got? So interviewed with the university, held a group interview, literally 25. Yeah. So this sounds like my situation. Not willing to invest the time.
Write an essay.
Yeah, they asked them to write an essay. So Michael, you didn't write the essay. I take it. We're going to assume.
That's pretty. I mean, 20. Well, it was a university, so they're like, it's class. You're back in class. Write an essay on why you should work here.
Michael didn't do it. So that's good for you, by the way, for not. That's become a growing trend. I keep seeing a lot of complaints. So Peter and I are both fans of we're both fans of Reddit, and specifically some subreddits that refer to job kind of crazy job stories. One in particular is called LinkedIn Lunatics, and you see lots of crazy stories. Another one is called Recruiting Hell. So check these out if you want to venture into that void of Reddit. Be prepared to go down the rabbit hole and not come back for hours potentially. But there's a growing trend where companies are asking for work to be done, work that they could actually use, like spend a day doing X, Y, Z.
Work on this project, particularly like software developers. They're like, how would you solve this project? Like something that would actually be part of their job. Like,
now, I will tell you, this is, I wasn't planning on telling this story, but this is a bit of I think it's relevant for today's topic. Years ago, we had a client who would do as a final step in an interview, and you could argue this is something that you shouldn't ask candidates to do. Look, we're in the middle. We guide clients, we advise them on what we think best practices should be, but we can't ultimately make decisions for them. And in this scenario, they were hiring instructional designers, and the last step was to do a project that would take about 30 minutes, right? So again, you could argue that that's an unfair ask. So we had a candidate who had gone through the process and was supposed to turn their project in, let's say, Friday at noon. Friday at noon comes, we call, hey, where's your project? Yeah, this is like almost a formality at this point. And she said, I'm in the hospital. I did it, but it's at home. I can't do it, blah, 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 in the hospital. So this goes on for a couple of days. And she, long story short, Monday it comes and she asks us for the password to get into the file that will let her do the project in the first place, making it very clear she never even opened it or had access to it, and certainly hadn't completed it. So unfortunately, as Mark Cuban would say, I'm out.
Yeah.
The manager was like, it's not happening.
Well, it's funny you bring up the Reddit thing, and kind of like, the project thing, I think that's usually overkill, because I've heard some crazy horror stories. Something asking them to do something or take a small coding test or what have you. That's pretty par for the course, I feel like. But I've had I remember there was a specific candidate. It was triggered by me reading a post on Reddit actually about them saying that thank you notes shouldn't be required, and that was like going above and beyond, and then that no one should care what they look like, dress wise. In an interview. And this guy, he had come in for an interview into the office at the time. This was years ago. And he'd worn like a polo shirt and like khaki pants. Like he looked like normal. It was like fine business professional. And I guess he showed up at the interview and he was like wearing like a t-shirt that had like an obvious stain on it. And the client manager was like, hey man, like, what are you doing? And he was like vehemently like, no, I'm not going to change my shirt because like my shirt isn't related to my job. And they shouldn't care about that at all. And that's just the way it's going to be. And like, he didn't get the job.
a man of principle.
Yeah, he didn't get the job. And I was like, and I remember having the conversation with him after the fact, and him being like, well, if they're, it shouldn't relate to that. It shouldn't relate to, the job. And I'm like, listen, I hear you. And I totally, like, I agree that your shirt does not affect your ability to do this job. The job was an IT job. I can't remember the specific one. But I was like, it's indicative of your level of like care. And if you're ever going to put your best foot forward, your interview is kind of, and I wasn't even asking him to wear it like a full suit. I was like, just I think I told him business professional, because the office was kind of casual anyway. And I'm like, what are you going to do with that? Like, people showing up with literal grease stains on the side of their shirt.
Yeah, I think we've encountered that a lot over the years. So we've recruited from very low end positions to very senior executive positions, and we of course encourage everyone to dress professionally. Wear a tie. For guys, women wear a business suit. but not everyone can do that. And for years we had ties in our office, we had suit coats in our office, or we could meet people. And so if you're a candidate and you don't feel like you have the right attire for an interview, if you're interviewing in person, ask your recruiter. Let them know. And that is the answer for so many things that pertain to the recruiting process. Just communicate. Just ask. Don't wonder. Don't worry. Just bring it to the forefront. And once again, I don't mean to sound like a Boy Scout with this, but I've always found that people just end up making a logical, rational decision and doing the right thing in those scenarios. So managers understand if people don't have the right clothes to wear for an interview. What nobody appreciates is someone who shows complete lack of regard for the situation or professionalism, as we just had a comment about. So it is about professionalism, and it's about taking that situation seriously, because whoever's interviewing and hiring and potentially bringing you on their payroll and into their organization, they're taking it very seriously, and they want to see the candidate does too.
And it's funny because so on the other end of that, like the candidates that I would always say, and this is how I learned the hard way, like I would be like, hey, what are you planning on wearing, like, to this interview? Because you say, hey, dress nice. Dressing nice means different things to different people. And I would say, you want to make a good impression. And I told this to a candidate that you want to dress nice and you want to stand out and make a good impression, because I had before, like, people showing up and just kind of being generally like uninterested, not engaged, and not amazingly dressed, but just people who were subpar, I would say, for for the seriousness of the interview. I had a candidate interviewing for a junior network engineer at a large hospitality company, and I did not personally walk him in. The client manager did, but I had this conversation. I said, just dress nice. You want to make an impression. You want to stand out. He did. He showed up to the interview in a 3-piece white suit and a bowler hat. And the client manager was like, I don't know. I didn't know what to do with this. Like, it was like the kind you would wear to like prom. And the guy like tipped his hat at like the interviewer when the guy came out to like shake his hand. So I learned after that, I'd be like, just describe what do you have to wear? not just take it for granted, saying you want to stand out and you want to dress nice. I guess, a full wedding white suit is something nice, but
did he get the job? I don't remember.
He did not get the job.
I think cheer for that guy. You gotta hope he does.
I mean, he actually like knew his stuff. He just I think he came across as a little bit like they need the person to work on a team of 10 people, and they thought he was not he was better fit for maybe a smaller team, because he was very talkative, very outgoing, and a little bit distracting, I guess. But that was the word.
That reminds me. So I had a guy show up all dressed in, like, he looked like a magician that you'd see on stage in Vegas, all bright red suit.
Like
he didn't have a hat, but he did have red tie, red vest, red suit, red shoes. Got hired. It was beautiful. I mean, I was standing there with him. I felt like he was a Christmas tree. I was standing in the lobby with him, waiting for.
He matched everything. Like, he was like no contrast, same color.
He was impeccable though. When he got hired, I was like, all right, you got to put on your best. That was
you got to pull the confidence. Yeah, I mean, that's
great. we got away from this. So, Salome, if I'm pronouncing your name right, thank you for sharing this. Sounds like you had a kind of your own horror story with a group interview, like Michael did. Let us know more about it if you can. So Peter, you mentioned a team fit. So this is all these stories are now like running through my head. This is another large, very recognizable national brand hospitality company. Guy interviewed, high-end software developer, not an easy candidate to place and recruit. And he calls us after the first day. I don't remember. It's just been years, like 15 years ago. I don't remember if it was a manager or the candidate who called, or the contractor who was hired, says, not going to work out. Why not? Well, he walks into the office the first day. They show him where he's working. He'd interviewed. It all gone great. This had never come up. He was working in an office of 4, and the other 3 who were in the office worked in the dark. And so pitch black, he gets in there. They're like, here's where you sit. It's like pitch black. He goes and turns on the light. no words exchanged. I mean, this is the story, the version as I heard it, and I want to believe it actually happened.
Just sitting in the dark, and he's like,
no one says a word. He doesn't ask anything. He just flips on the light as a normal person would.
Yeah.
One of the other developers goes, shuts it off, sits back, and he's just.
It doesn't say anything about it. Just like
nobody's talking, and then he goes and flips the light back on. Guy flips it back, and then he goes out to the manager, and this, I don't know how, what kind of time frame this transpired over, and said, hey, listen, they're all working in the dark. And the manager's like, yeah, they don't like the lights on. Who wore the lights? Crystal. It was Crystal, of course, remembers this. It was our client. And they were like, yeah, they work in the dark. He's like, are you kidding me? I can't work that way. And like, I don't think he came back the next day. I think that was it. So like, we probably spent a month recruiting this guy, multiple interviews, unicorn type candidate. And the war of the lights, we'll call it.
Those IT roles, whenever you have someone who was like really high level, or like, I feel like talking about this, like you have to be your skill has to be inverse to how like weird you want to be or what you want to do. Because like there's like developer, and he came in to interview, and he took his shoes off in the interview and was like sitting cross-legged on his seat with his shoes off. And I was like, what's happening here? He was like the guy ended up getting like placed at a large hotel company. But yeah, he was like, he took off his shoes, and like I had talked to him about another thing. Like he had, I guess he had been interviewing with another company, and he told them they didn't want it because he lit up a cigarette like in the interview. Like it was like the 50s or something. He just like sit back in his chair, and they're like, there's no smoking here. Also, he's like indoors. And so like I've seen so many like people like that who still get placed because they have like really, high niche skills, but the feet off or the shoes off, like cross-legged on his seat. I was like, what are you doing, man? We're like,
all right. So you mentioned smoking, and listen, I'm not judging. Okay. Whatever. Right. But I grew up in a household that, my parents smoked for years before they quit. Mm-hmm. And I know they smoked indoors, and I'm sure everywhere we went, we smelled like it. Right. And people can't smoke in restaurants anymore. I'm not around people day to day that smoke. So when you smell it, it's pretty obvious. And specifically, when someone's been smoking in their car with their windows up and they're in their home, because they just, it's like they're saturated in it. Well, I walked into Kansas again a long time ago, so I don't mind telling this story. And it was just offensive. I can't think of a better way to describe the odor. I mean, it smelled like a wet ashtray. So if you can kind of in your mind picture that, and like you couldn't get away from it within a couple feet. And so I'm sitting there in the lobby. So this was back when in a long time ago, when everyone actually worked in an office, and we would of course walk in all our candidates for their interview, and I'm sitting there going, what am I going to do? There's no way this is, I mean, it's just so bad. And there was a receptionist desk had a bowl of mints. I'm like, okay, at least I can help right with this. So I walk over, grab a couple mints, offer her one, and she declined it. I mean, that is like the thing that has stuck out of my mind over the years with that is like, no, I'm good. And I'm like,
you sure?
You good? You want one? No, thanks. I'm good. She did not get the job. She did not get hired.
It's funny because you talk about like walking people in. There was like the one, this is a story I'm going to tell earlier. It was like a lower level HR job. And the candidate like had their mom like come with them to the actual interview to like walk in. Like she like sat in the lobby with them while they interviewed. They like went but the worst part was not necessarily that she drove them there and everything. And the person was like almost 30 years old, that she sat there. And then when the interviewer came out, like walked the person out, they like introduced, they're like, oh, this is my mother. Like, I know I just made you like, here's my mother. And like, that was like one of those things where you had to be like, hey man, I know you may be nervous and all that, but like maybe don't have them like come into the actual thing with you, and definitely don't have introduced them to your potential future boss that you're just meeting for the first time.
Don't bring them in.
Yeah.
Don't bring them in. That has happened. Not moms. I haven't encountered parents, but spouses more times than you would think would happen. Now, again, we're talking thousands of candidates in interviews over almost 2 decades for me. Surprising number of times, a spouse would show up in the lobby. Like, what are you doing here? I get that you're share a car, but you can't. It's not a group thing. It's just not going to work. You can't.
We used to get people like students whose moms would call in and ask for like feedback on their interviews on the person's behalf. And it'd be like my son's the person interviewing. I'm like, how old is your son? Like, oh, he's 23. He's an adult, and I'm not just gonna give you information because you're his mom, like you said.
No, like literally, you can't do that. What we had, there was a guy that failed to. I'm not going to tell that story. Okay. All right. Let's share one from someone else. Stacy, thank you for sharing. Let's see. You reschedule 5. Oh,
that's always the worst when they're like people just like they clearly did not, care.
Eating lunch. I mean, that I would love to have had a recording of that to see what happens. You watch them
just eat lunch while reading your resume. That's clear they had like no idea they had an interview. They're like,
so what happened, Stacey? You gotta let us know if you're still with us. Did you get the? Are you working there now? Is that your car? We don't want to know that, but good job. So yeah, Michael had someone lean back in his chair too.
That's way too common because that's happened to me a couple times where like people will like lean back and like, or they'll just be like leaning over or something. I'm like, I can't even see you. Especially, now that we're remote, I feel like people are like they're in their house, so they've gotten a little bit too comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you IT guys, that you're in high demand. You can get, get some liberties, and but
like I said, your skill dictates how much you can get away with.
Stacy is not. All right, Stacy, we're happy for that. Hopefully, you're good where you are. Listen, we haven't checked in with Virtual Ashley for a while, so let's just see if she has anything to contribute.
No, I can't hear. I don't.
He's
mic's not working.
Thinking about talking, but no, still nothing. All right. Well, maybe before we're done, Virtual Ashley will join us. And if you are coming in late and you're on with us now, Ashley is out of town today, couldn't be here, but Virtual Ashley is here in spirit.
I feel
AI
like
Ashley, if you will.
I feel like we could do a whole section on people, remote interviewing etiquette. Now that we're in, the post-COVID era. So
the eating thing is big, right? Like there was a whole, I know we had a meme video that we made, actually made last year about eating, is it okay to eat in a Zoom meeting, right? Like we do that and no, don't do that. Unless it's a Zoom lunch meeting and you all agree ahead of time. That's it. Otherwise, no food.
Yeah, especially like something like loud and crunchy. I remember I was talking to a recruiter and they came in after and they're like, this candidate pulled out a bag of Fritos and started like eating them in the interview. And they said like they have low blood sugar, so they have to eat Fritos. They have to eat. And I'm like, they couldn't eat like literally before it. Like the interview was not a long one. It was like 20 minutes. Like they couldn't eat before. And it's like the loudest, crunchiest thing like over this bag.
So, all right. So I have a new story and I wrote down a bunch and I haven't even referenced one I've written down yet because these things just keep popping in my head. This was, because again, long enough ago where I don't mind telling it. So candidate, multiple rounds, had a phone screen, went really well. She was young. She was in mid, late 20s. Was really, really great candidate on paper, interviewed really well. All her screening and qualification effort with her went really well. Manager was really excited to hire her. And day comes for her in-person interview. It was a Friday, which I remember. And she calls us or sends a message, didn't call and say, hey, listen, my grandmother passed away. I can't make it. Now, if you're in recruiting for any period of time or for long enough, you have the trifecta. What I personally, this is not an industry thing, but I personally refer to as a trifecta of BS. That is sick kids, broken down cars, and dead or dying grandparents, right? Everyone, everyone thinks they're original, right? Sort of like the question you answered, like I'm too much of a perfectionist. That's my problem.
Yeah.
That's my weakness. Everyone thinks they're original. No, your kids aren't sick, probably, right? It happens, but I come up with a better excuse. So her excuse was her grandmother died. Now, in the hospitals, okay, that's enough of a karma issue, but to actually claim death, right? That's an entirely different thing. So I'm my red flags went up. I was suspicious. It just didn't seem right. And so I told her recruiter, I said, ask if, let's listen, if this is real, we want to respect it. Let's find out where she is. So, where the funeral is, wherever they made arrangements, let's send flowers, right? Like, let's do that. Because what an awful, awful thing. And, she's like, yeah, no, we don't, she responded like, pretty quickly. No, there's no need to do anything like that. So now our red flags are really flying. I get on Facebook, look her up, and pops up right away. She was taking her boyfriend to the beach, surprising him for his birthday. And so I send her an email that basically says, hey, listen, we're going to pull you from candidacy. It's not going to be a good fit. And, tell Jeff happy birthday for us. And that was it. And, send. And she wrote me a book. I mean, to her credit, she, owned it, was appropriately sorry and apologetic, but we did not let her continue as a candidate.
Yeah. And if you're listening to us, like, I've talked to so many people in my life that are like, I'll be like, that's not real, or this person made up a thing. Like, it sounds like we're being callous. Like, we've heard it so many times. Like, I must be the Grim Reaper for the amount of times I've heard people's grandparents are sick or dying, or people's cars break down. Like, I break cars for a living because if you talk to me, your car's going to break down. Like, that's
if you look at if you think it's just us, talk to someone in your life who's been a recruiter for any period of time, and I'll be shocked if they don't agree. Sick kids, because you can't challenge that, right? You can't go. Yeah. I mean, and listen, I've given that excuse. I have 4 kids. They're older now, but when they were little, we'd make plans on a Wednesday. Saturday, we'd roll around and be like, oh, that's the last thing I want to do. Sick kid, no one has a fever, right? No one wants them around. You're out. It's the trump card to get out of anything. Car problems, can't make it. Now, the savvy recruiter, we've done this too. And I will say, every once in a while, people have taken us up on this. Hey, we'll come pick you up, right? Mm-hmm. We'll give you a ride. We'll call an Uber for you. So you can't really use the car excuse anymore. Uber sort of gotten rid of that. But
I remember a guy who said that, and I was like, oh, come on. And then he took the bus and got there, and I was like, I'm actually impressed. Like, I am wrong. Like, and he got the job. They were like, this guy is very dedicated.
Yeah. All right. Stacy asked about it. I don't have an AI interview story yet. We do. Listen, we see a lot of AI content that people write, but it hasn't really affected interviews much. I mean, that's a question probably for Virtual Ashley.
Well, she's living in the Matrix right now, so she can't. She doesn't. Agent Smith's gonna come find her.
She seems interested in it. We'll just let her sit there. But no, we haven't had one of those yet. So if anyone else has one, share it with us, please.
I've seen candidates with they'll write their resumes, and you can tell it's very their entire resume is written by AI, and they'll use that. Or there is one caveat where someone was it's a technical interview, and they would send you questions and be like, hey, can you answer them? And the person was clearly typing onto in ChatGPT the question that was being asked in the phone interview, and the candidate was reading it off because it was very technical. And then the candidate got an in-person interview and couldn't answer anything in person. So they're like, where did this knowledge come from? And the guy was like, oh, well, I used ChatGPT to help me study, is what he said. I was like, I read between the lines there.
Wait, Crystal has one.
I think she's.
Oh, well, so we had.
We've had that.
This was at I'll just say a very large, very recognizable brand in Central Florida had a guy interview. Now, this was a unique scenario. They, our client actually said, go find this candidate. It was a very unique skill set. Again, a kind of what people call a purple squirrel, a unicorn candidate. It's very hard to find. And they said, this is one of the few people in the country who have the skill set to do it. If you can get this guy, we'll hire him, no questions asked. We're like, we'll just do a quick phone screen and make the decision. We're like, awesome, that's great. So we tracked the guy down, and he interviews, and they're like, yep, just as good as we remember. I guess he had worked there in the past. This is coming back to me now. Mm-hmm. And he'd worked there in the past. Shows up, they call us a couple of days in. They're like, yeah, this isn't, but sorry, I'm telling this out of turn. No one who was there had met him before. He had been there in the past before any of the team was there. They just kind of knew him by the work he had done years prior.
Reputation,
right?
yeah.
He shows up, they call, this is not the guy who interviewed. This is not the same person. And lo and behold, he was definitely not the same person. So what he was doing for the couple of days he was there, he was on some sort of an instant messenger. Every time they would ask him to do something, he'd get on IM, and I guess he was coordinating with the actual person who he knew who would send him in there to do the job. But
he like kept his other job.
That didn't end well. That wasn't good.
Yeah, I was gonna say we definitely I've had like ones where that's like that kind of scenario, and like the guy's like looking off the screen, like you could tell he's like reading something, or like he would like a question and there'd be like a pause, like look, and then you'd be like, oh yeah, blah 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 blah, and then like look back and like all right, how do you do this in this technology? The person like looks off the screen for a second and then answers the question.
Okay, this is great. Look at this. Their extended family had died several times.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
yeah. I mean, listen. If I'm gonna make something up, I'm not gonna flirt with death. I mean, like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm like.
Who no, don't do that. And Stacey, you said your son had an AI experience. Let us know what that is if you can. I wish we could just bring people on live. We need to figure out how to do that.
We need a caller. Yeah, caller. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah. So all right. So what else? So all right.
I mean, I've got a bunch relating to remote interviews and just like stuff going on in the background and people like not like being aware of that. So like I'm talking to some of the recruiters and the sales team and just the ones I've had. And I've seen people who they have the background blurred, and I get that everybody doesn't have the same setup. Like people have to make do with what they have. But like he was sitting there and there was like bright lines, but it's blurred out so you can't see exactly what they are. And like periodically, like something would hit him in the head. And I, after about like a minute, I was like, this guy is sitting like literally in his closet, like among the coats, not even just like with a wall. Like it was like cloth, like coming into the thing. I was talking to the recruiter and one of the team, and they were saying like this person was interviewing and there was like a bed behind him and they didn't have it blurred. And there's like a person laying in bed the whole time, like just like in the background, like they're like looking at the screen, or someone had their cat jump and like instead of like, things happen at home, but instead of shooing away, the cat just like sits there, like literally on their shoulder the whole time. I've actually seen that one. I've had that where people like, it'll just like walk and they'll be like, oh, like Fluff is here. And instead of being like, put him away, they'll be like, oh, he's going to sit here now with us. And just like a cat, like,
yeah, virtual work has, certainly created some interesting scenarios without question. All right, I got a couple more.
Okay, hit me with them.
This one, it was such an awkward thing because it was going so well. Candidate phone screened, great. Shows up. I remember he was a pretty young guy, and whoever had met him, it wasn't me. Someone met him on site for his in-person interview. And he was like rushing at the last minute. Now, look, if you're a candidate, even if it's online, show up early. Show up 5 minutes early online if you need to. Log in early. Make sure your connection's good. Make sure it works. Give yourself a couple minutes. Don't be late. Don't ever be late. Sometimes there's software updates. It happens to me every once in a while on Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. I open it at the last minute, and it takes 2 minutes to update, and everyone has to wait, right? Yeah. Don't do that as a candidate. But in person, 15 minutes, like always be at least 15 minutes early. Show up 30 minutes early. I mean, we always tell our candidates that. Most of them listen. This guy didn't. So he comes rushing in at the last second, just barely makes it. And we're thinking all is well because on paper he was perfect for the job. His phone screen had gone so well. And they called like 30 minutes after he got there and said, he is out. There's no way we're going to hire him. And you guys are looking really bad with us right now. We're like, what in the world? Well, he parked in the CEO's reserved parking spot. So this building, it's like a 5 or 6 story building, had a parking garage attached to it. But it had maybe 5 or 6 open spots like right by the front door. Yeah. This one reserved for whatever the CEO's name is. And this guy took it upon himself because he was late to just park right in there. CEO shows up, walks into the office raging, who is in my space? Have that car towed. Thank goodness they didn't have the candidate's car towed. He wasn't there long enough. They realized it was him, and
you're not getting the job.
He did not get the job, and they did not. They actually held out against us pretty strongly, which was interesting. It's been so long, I can't tell you whether we continue to. We don't work with them anymore. I don't know if that's why. It's been years. We have that definitely hurt our retention rate for our clients, which we are extremely protective and proud of, and have one of the highest in the entire staffing industry. I have to believe. But that one in particular,
in retrospect, though, like that's such a funny, like that's like a movie thing. Like they're like, oh, I got a spot, but like obviously, like there's a sign right there that says reserved for so and so.
They pulled him out of the interview, and the CEO yells at him like that, and so then the candidate was mad. I'm remembering all this. The candidate was mad, and we're like, "What are you mad at? You did it!" But to be yelled at by the CEO, and actually, now that I think even more about it, we sort of were turned off by that too. We're like, man, like I know that shouldn't have happened, but is that the biggest offense, really? Like you're gonna treat a candidate like the CEO came across like a crazy person.
Yeah, like being annoyed about it is one thing, and being like, this guy's clearly, but that's a bad way to handle it, and probably I guess it worked out. Maybe he didn't work there anyway.
All right, so Stacy shared with her that her son's AI interview story. So
so we actually interviewed with an AI. That's interesting.
So it was like an AI, like a bot asking the questions. Oh, they had the wrong interview set up. Nice, perfect, lovely.
That actually reminds. So I've seen where that's the case where companies will be like, all right, now this thing is going to ask you a question, and you have to videotape yourself like answering the question while it's like asking it in real time. And like, it's a common thing. Like people will be like, it's kind of awkward. Like it'll just like ask a question that's like not really relevant to the situation. And I guess it's to save time. I mean, we obviously talk to clients and we're like, hey, whatever you give is what you're going to get back. Like if you're going to say it's not worth your time to like interview them, you're not going to get the highest quality candidates.
No. All right. This is a comment. This is a little off from what we're talking about, but it's relevant to staffing and recruiting and what we do. So yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Why so many people that experience of interviewing and then being told at the end you don't have the right qualifications. That's really an anomaly today. I think to happen. Most people are really struggling to get an interview. There's so many candidates on the market right now. Why someone would do that is beyond me. I've had it happen to me. If it makes you feel any better at all, I was a candidate years ago. I was working at Tech Data Corporation, and I was looking to leave. And I interviewed with Siebel Systems software organization or software company, and a friend who worked there set it up, and I wanted this job so badly. It sounded great, and I was really excited about it. And the guy. First question, he says, what experience do you have selling software solutions like ours? I'm like, yeah, I don't have any. I don't have any of that specific experience. However, I'm sure I answered better than that. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, this isn't a good fit. I mean, I waited like a week for like this 5-minute conversation. I'm like, did you even look at my resume? Like, it was very clear that I did not have this experience. But it happens. I mean, it's an industry of we're in the middle, right? We're in the middle of candidates and companies who hire. Sometimes there's not a third party like us in there. And you see all kinds, you see all situations, and there's never a one size fits all. That scenario should never happen. If you're working with the recruiter, whenever you have that opportunity, ask what they're looking for. What is their key hiring criteria? I mean, that is when I was selling staffing solutions, when I was managing accounts and taking a job requirement from a client, I would put the job description aside. This was my process. If I was working with someone on a role for the first time, it was unfamiliar to me, I'd put it aside and I would ask the hiring manager to give me their key hiring criteria. It was just my phrase that I used over and over, and I highly recommend it because to me, it really gets to the heart of what's relevant and important to the person doing the hiring. And if you know that, then you know how to prepare for the interview, at least from a hard skill standpoint. So if that's helpful at all, hopefully it is. But Peter, that's how I always did it. And I'm telling you, you can boil most jobs down to about 5 bullet points that really matter. And the rest of the job description is usually fluff.
The only times I've ever seen, people in situations where they're like interviewed but don't have a key is it's either, some recruiters is, and this happens in the industry. We don't obviously do it, but it's like they'll be trying to fill a quota, so they're trying to get us submitted all over. So that's one scenario. I say do your homework on the recruiting agency and that you're working with, and that's the best thing you can do as a candidate. The other is lack of communication with the manager, or the HR manager has a job description from the hiring manager who told them they need so-and-so. And then only after the fact, they're like, actually, I need them to know this specific technology. And I assumed you would know that. Whereas the hiring manager is like, I'm not an IT person. I don't know that unless you tell me that. So that communication is key. And so as a candidate, talk to them and be like, what are the key skills I need to know for this job? That usually will get someone to thinking like, all right, well, they really got to know these 3 things. And that's all that matters,
That's it.
So,
all right. Well, we're at 5. I've got lots of stories, but we're at 5 o'clock. I think Virtual Ashley is getting tired of being stuck in the mode that she's in. She still seems energetic, but I think she's probably ready to move on. We'll leave her with that.
We need to do an interviewers episode when we get back and talk about some crazy hiring manager ones for the candidates out there.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to have the opportunity to do another show before New Year's. So if we don't, everyone have a safe and happy New Year's, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, have a great time, be safe, have fun. If you're working, relax. If you're looking for a job, relax a little bit too. I know it can be a stressful time, but enjoy the time that you have. Easier said than done. I get it. Remind myself of that too. And look, follow our, interact with us on LinkedIn. We post a lot of content. We love interaction. I mean, it makes it so much better. We really appreciate it as well. Follow us on our social channels. Ashley works really hard on our TikTok videos. We have a lot of fun there. Look, we have to work, and our philosophy is we may as well have fun while we do it. Exactly. And so part of that is getting to know new people and using social media like LinkedIn and all the other platforms to connect. So reach out to us. We really like it. And hopefully we can help and add value along the way too. We live in this space. It's all we do. We think about careers, think about jobs, recruiting, staffing. I mean, that's our world. So if we can ever help, reach out and we'll be happy to do our best.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone.
All right. Thanks. Goodbye for now.
Bye, guys.